Hello YouTube, just out of the theater, I got to see Ghostbusters Afterlife. Day one opening, this movie for me, 10 out of 10. My favorite movie so far of the year. I really enjoyed Dune. Other movies have been a little bit more hit or miss. Several of them quite big misses. This is by far and away my favorite movie so far of 2021. And I gotta tell you, the stakes were high for this one for me personally. Ghostbusters for me is a perennial top 10 movie. Ghostbusters Afterlife completely met and exceeded my expectations, and like I said, I was nervous that that they might get it wrong. My expectations were tempered because I didn't want to be disappointed. Having seen the movie, and I will see it again, if not tomorrow, on Saturday. Tonight's Thursday night. I just watched it. If I don't see it again tomorrow, I'm going to see it with the kids on Saturday. I will see it at least one more time in the theater. But loved this movie. This felt like an 80s film. I guess if you haven't watched many 80s films or you don't like them, maybe it's not for you. But for me, that's a compliment. We had... There's certainly bad movies made in the 80s, but there were some incredibly beloved films and film franchises that started in the late 70s and in the 80s that studios are still trying to capitalize on those successes and the popularity of those movies today. But just so much more so because I think of how much it honored the original characters, the original concept, and the original fans. Got to give the movie makers credit for that. The characters, all the characters felt distinct. They felt meaningful. The script needed them there. And I can't tell you how many movies I feel these days are just missing that. A lot of times you'll get characters that are like, you could cut this character entirely from the movie. Wouldn't change the plot at all. Wouldn't change the motivations for the characters, anything. They're just there because, we need X to be in there because people expect it, or because, it meets one of our requirements, something like that. All the characters in this movie had a role, and the movie wouldn't have worked without them. And it's so nice to see a script given that kind of attention and that kind of love. This thing was not a draft cranked out by a committee in 4 days. Somebody clearly spent some time with this. And it shows. It shows in the characterizations. It shows in the way the timeline was constructed and things were introduced. It really shows. And I think when you see it compared to some other movies big movies that have released recently, it's going to be painfully obvious, like where writers took time and attention. Certainly going to see how it holds up on our rewatch. I'm pretty high on it right now, just from having loved the movie and just got out of it. Kids are the heart of Ghostbusters Afterlife, but they're still kids, and the script realizes that, honors that even. They're the heart of the movie, not because they succeeded at everything they try, right? But because they're willing to try. And even when they fail, they're still willing to try again. Something that a lot of adults struggle with. And that's nice to see out of kids. And the child actors in this did a great job. Really good casting and obviously good direction to get them to perform that way. And fan service, I think it's pretty obvious from any of the media surrounding this film that there was going to be fan service for people who love the original Ghostbusters, any of the Ghostbusters movies in this film, and that's certainly the case. Like, if you're turned off by callbacks and fan service, this may not be the movie for you. I think this was fan service done incredibly tastefully. Not only did it call back to the original characters, but it did so in a reasonable way, and in a way that really honored the best of those characters. And that, I think, is something that's been sorely lacking in other franchise reboots. Particularly for me, it's when I think of Star Wars. I see Disney trying so hard to push their own characters and new merchandise, whatever it is they're trying to push, and they will tear down, they will deconstruct their original characters just to make their new characters seem a little bit better. In this film, there was none of that. There's plenty of space for a rising tide to lift all the ships. And the film itself was beautiful, really well shot, really gave you a sense of place. There wasn't a single thing that I can think of that yanked me out of the story. Dune had this. Dune was very immersive. It really had this sense of place where, it felt like I was pulled into Arrakis and I was experiencing that story while there. I think of Shang-Chi. There was quite a few things in that movie, like the bamboo forest. just moving through that forest, and they're in a vehicle, and like, why are they driving through this? And like, couldn't one person with a helicopter like totally work around all of these? Is so poorly contrived that it really yanked me out of the story. Nothing like that for Ghostbusters Afterlife. It was beautiful. It was immersive. Really felt like the writers knew what they were doing with this place and made the choices they made on purpose. The effects were super solid. I mean, they definitely called back to the 80s film, but the effects were really tastefully done. Again, everything wasn't just a big green screen, people jumping around and waving their arms and stuff, and we'll put in digitals later. It was really, really just well made. The writing and the dialogue, spot on. You didn't have characters that, not to pick on Marvel too much, but you didn't have characters like in the Marvel movies these days where there's heartfelt moments and like, oh, it's time for a joke. You insert a quippy one-liner or a bit of sarcasm that feels entirely out of place to the tone of a moment. The humor in this landed really, really well. The first 3 jokes in this movie were landed better than all the jokes in the 3 Marvel movies I've seen all year long. Last thing I'll say is, if you're at all prone to getting weepy in movies, there's 2 or 3, definitely 2, possibly 3 places in this movie that probably going to choke you up. It's a feel-good movie, and I love that. Good Lord, it's about time. It's a feel-good movie, but it's not afraid to hit you in the feels when it needs to. Again, it does it in a way that really honors and respects the franchise and the characters that have come before it. I don't know if they're setting up for more of these, but man, I hope so. I'd be there for it. If this crew has time and resources to work on more scripts and really put the time in, do the work, I think they can really build on this. I know studios are desperate for content and for more franchises, ones they haven't inappropriately ridden to death, which we've seen some of, particularly with science fiction, I guess I should say, science fiction and superheroes. Based on the strength of this team that made this movie, there's space in the Ghostbusters franchise for more. So, 10 out of 10. Loved this film. Go see it in the theater. See it on a big screen. See it in IMAX if you can. Really, really enjoyed this movie. I'll definitely be buying it. I still have my VHS copies of the original Ghostbusters, and I'll definitely be getting this one as well. Anyway, that's my thoughts. Loved this movie. Loved it. Best movie of the year so far for me.